Celebrity Book Club. Who's that knocking at the door? It's all your friends, you filthy whore. Your husband's gone and we've got books and a bottle of wine to kill. It's Hollywood. It's books. It's gossip. I'm shook. It's memoirs. It's martinis. It's Studio 54. It's Celebrity Book Club. Come read it while it's hot. Celebrity Book Club. Tell your secrets, we won't talk. Celebrity Book Club. No boys are allowed. Celebrity Book Club. Say it loud and proud. Celebrity Book Club.
Buzz me in, I brought the Cuervo.
Hey,
best friend. How are you?
I'm so good. I've had a really, really intense, beautiful week full of personal struggle, but I've come out on the other end feeling inspired and ready to embrace the world and life in all of its natural beauty.
Oh my God. That's so beautiful. Would you mind sharing with our audience one of your struggles?
Yeah. As someone who deals with issues of sleep deprivation and LGBTQ, I have turned to
UIA.
UIA, as Kelly Ripa would say. I have turned to BetterHelp, and it has really changed my life. No, mostly it's just like sleep stuff. We just got back from Chicago and like I was tiring and I was there late and I was also in Wisconsin and you're going to hear about that in the VIP lounge and you're going to hear about...
You're hearing about us eating in Chicago and us like sleeping in parents' yoga rooms and us eating more and like me buying boots and...
I will tell you about the coleslaw salad that my boyfriend's stepmom made that had dry ramen in it.
Oh.
It was okay. I'll tell you.
That's killing me.
It was wild. Wisconsin cuisine is absolutely wild.
No, it's absolutely like chaotic but amazing. I just a little tidbit for our listeners, and maybe this will seduce them over the VIP lounge. Did I ever tell you a story how when I left Wisconsin, I bought cheese curds, but I put them in my bag, and then that bag ended up getting put in the stowaway, whatever. What do you call it when it's checked?
Okay, it was in the basement of the plane.
Yeah, so I finally get the bag back a day later, and the cheese curds were actually like packed with a sex toy implement, I'll say. And it was just this bag of like curds and a dildo.
Curds and dildo?
And I was like, wait, but it's curds. They are like smoked or whatever? Question marks. Like, can I still eat them? Is it safe?
Well, you thought the dangerous part was that they interacted with the dildo too much.
No. They were in packaging, so it didn't. It was more of a visual treat.
And then it's because they're kind of the same consistency as a dildo.
It's silicone-esque.
Yeah,
it's rubbery.
They're super rubbery, kind of squeaky, like firm. But have a little bit of give to them.
A little bit of give to, replicate that.
Well, that would have been great if you kind of mistook one for the other.
Oh, hello.
In go the curds.
Okay. Wow, yeah.
I think you still could have eaten them because the whole thing about cheese curds is that they actually don't need to be refrigerated.
Right. I think I did try. I think I had like a few. And then was like, okay, now I'm going to like then change my mind after having a few. Nothing bad happened. Obviously, they were fine. And that goes to show our American society, we're so worried about expiration dates, No,
we're so expiration pilled. And my boyfriend, who's a scientist, is always saying, like, don't ever listen to the dates. Just like smell it. Use your eyes. Use your fingers. Use your senses.
Okay? You can tell, open cheese if it smells. It smells.
Yeah.
If a hot dog feels slimy, it's gone bad.
Right. Okay. If a mushroom feels dry, it's gone bad. Maybe not. Depends.
Well,
if it's
no, because dried mushrooms are like a thing,
right?
That you can rehydrate. I thought your boyfriend was a scientist.
Yeah, but I'm not. Okay, but what is the thing? But there is like some vegetables that get slimy. It's like asparagus or like a scallion gets slimy. That's gross. You know what I mean?
Most vegetables get
it starts
slimy.
to get like weirdly wet. Like, yeah.
Vegetables, you can definitely tell when they go rotten by touch and smell. I have been engaging in my senses this week as I am now using Flonase every day.
And you're doing your nasal rinse.
Well, no, I still need to do that. And it's just the remembering.
Yeah.
And that's not a sense, but that's definitely...
Some say it's the sixth sense is memory.
is memory. So, and it's so hard. And so I need to get a little more memento and start writing nasal rinse, get
Yeah, you need to take Polaroids of your NeilMed sinus rinse. Yeah, I do wish you the best in that journey. But have you noticed that the NeilMed, is the Flonase already make a difference?
The Flonase is already working. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's loosening up things in there that...
Allergies.
It honestly, it feels... Yeah,
Even
I'm
though,
like,
what did they say? They said you were only allergic to, like...
sycamore trees. Oh, yeah. Fellow listeners, I have a confession. I took an allergy test where they do, like, this prong... all up and down your arms to test you, you know, dairy, pollen, blah, blah, blah. And the doctor was like, so you are actually only allergic to sycamore trees.
I just don't know if I believe that.
And I started like laughing because I was just like, that's just so ridiculous. I'm like, it just means I'm allergic to nothing basically. And she was like still just being kind of, I was trying to like make jokes, being so like, okay, like better not go to a sycamore festival. And she was just kind of being like, yeah, so if you do notice that you're a little stuffy, like in a park.
Yeah, why don't you just monitor your sycamore intake, please? And maybe take this a little bit more seriously because it is your health.
Okay, this is not a joke. And I was also told I was narrow-nosed.
Yeah, I could have told you that.
Probably because of my Roman.
Yeah. What we're calling the Romanesque.
Dealing with that, learning that I'm allergic to sycamore trees. That's been something, it's been kind of like grief, acceptance, the whole sadness, excitement. I mean, this is going to be a health...
This is a health-focused episode.
I mean, and also health question mark. What is health?
So true. Health is wealth and wealth is happiness. But wealth is also money and fame, which our memoirist does have this week. She used her senses to tell if vegetables were bad. She used her senses to change the world.
She used her senses to feel more than many
do.
can. We are talking about none other than fellow alum of Cambridge School of Weston, my high school.
No, my jaw dropped because I didn't know that when we got to that part in the book. I was like, wait, this bitch went to Cambridge school?
Yeah, literally went to Cambridge School.
Just like literally a fellow alumnus.
Yeah, fellow alum. You know her. Deaf. Blind.
Beautiful.
Fucking hot as hell.
Helen Keller.
And her book, My Story?
No, The Story of My Life.
The Story of My Life. Okay.
Is it another My Story? It's The Story of My Life.
I feel like we've read 90 books recently that are called My Story.
All right, so let's just go in. First of all, the cover, she's giving like sexy e-girl. She's doing middle part. She's doing looking down glam.
Yeah, looking down girl. And maybe that they chose the looking down because it's like, because there are many photos of her eyes up.
Right. Do her eyes have that thing where it's like you can tell she's blind or no?
A little bit. I was getting blind vibes, but is that because I've already attached this blind?
Or is it because you're literally blind?
Yeah, because I'm truly blind.
Yeah, when you take off those Coke bottles, I'm just like, oh shit.
Right.
What up, Helen?
Lily Helen Murata.
Yeah, I think, no, she looks very graceful. She's wearing this kind of like, you know, gauzy, silky top. It's being very like coquettish, Lolita, marry me.
And I feel like, you know, she was getting probably clothes from...
She's doing a full brow also, which is very kind of like now, I want to say.
Her whole thing, yeah, to be like heavy brow, blind... I mean, I feel like she is now so like current, like TikTok disability activist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
She's like,
and like
doing like such a routine in her apartment.
Like, I feel like she would be like stomping the runways now at like...
She would be cast in every show.
Yeah, not every show.
Okay.
A few shows. Yeah. cult model.
But I could see her being like such a just like she's in a Vans campaign, and she's also in like the Fenty campaign, and she's also in the NARS campaign.
Yeah, definitely doing NARS and like Anastasia, and they're giving her a heavy brow. So they didn't have like sunglasses back then. When did that start, by the way?
So true. Readers chime in. When were
sunglasses
invented?
for the blind?
Wait, that is kind of crazy though, because if you think about it, the sun's been around forever.
No, sun's been here longer than Cambridge School of West.
And just like people in the 1700s, it's like Ben Franklin was being so spectacles or whatever, but like they weren't doing sunglasses. Like people aren't walking around with like big wraparounds in 1730 Philadelphia, and I don't know why.
But in her time, so she was born, I want to say 1891.
I think it was earlier than that. Mid to late 1800s.
I've seen old models of like, I think like original steampunk circular glasses with very thin wires.
Okay.
So...
Okay, this is a total sidebar, but I had a memory this week because I've been really...
Oh my God, memories.
I've been in touch with my other senses. You know, trying to do a little less of the old sight and hearing.
Hell yes.
I had this memory that I had this very, very vivid, prolonged fantasy when I was a child for many, many years that when I was older, that I would have an extremely high, technologically advanced eye patch. And it would be kind of steampunk, and it would have like a leather band.
Stop.
And it would be like a digital eye patch. And just by moving my eye, it would like zoom in on things and have like so many scan, like Girl with the Dragon tattoo.
Okay,
like,
so it was like
Matrix.
A full like...
Yeah.
Dr. Evil, but Bond,
yes,
like
it was
crazy
a Bond
villain.
Doctor. It was the Dr. Evil, like crazy eye
headband, and it's being like beep 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 beep, and it's so many numbers going by and zooming in fast.
So many
and
numbers
you can, like,
and zooming in, and I'm like
see through a house.
I can see through a house and just like see a gentleman's member. Like
You're naughty. Who? I mean, so many. And this is, again, so much against the blind, because I feel like we always give villains eye patches, you know?
Right. That's so true. We always...
Hook.
Yeah, and yet, I think what that reveals, though, is that sight is almost like... Sight itself is evil in this way, because it's like so superficial. It's like the villain wants to see more. The villain wants to use his eyes, you know, to cast about the world and colonize the world, like with his vision. Where it's like a true blind person is like has this more, or at least certainly in Helen Keller's world, is more pure in this way, and they're more in touch with their feeling.
Well, actually, it's okay. So it's vision is evil, blind is angelic, and then one eye. That's the classic. It's bisexual. Murderer. It's bisexual.
Murderer.
Yeah. Half and half.
Yeah.
I was just reading, and you know, this is about how like. The before we really get into the book, the criticisms of Helen Keller, and they're saying, like, some people were saying that like it was the beginning of like treating people with disabilities as like childlike. Yes, of just being so like, oh, okay, like we'll treat you, you know, more simpler, which I think, but then a lot of people are being like,
which also has a sort of a very sexual, like, Lolita-fied element to it.
A lot of this book is just about how she, of course, who wouldn't be, is like loves her lifelong companion teacher.
So here's my question.
Mrs. Sullivan.
Mrs. Sullivan. So Mrs. Sullivan is her teacher, like, who teaches her how to read, and speak. Because she's literally, so she goes deaf and blind, like, very early in life. She's, like, young, and she gets sick, and then she, like, gets unsick, but then stays blind and deaf. And, like, it's very fascinating. She, like, learns to read by, like, first touching... just having people write on her palm. And
do you remember this? So she, to learn the word water, Mrs. Sullivan pours water on her head and then writes out the word water on her palm. I mean, sorry, this book is erotic.
It's
okay?
so erotic and sensual. Well, there's so much There's just so much
touch. Yeah.
There's so much touch everywhere. And then she, like, when she goes to the Perkins School for the Blind in Boston, she begins, like, touching people's mouths. And she, like, did a little bit when she was younger. But, like, to really learn, she, like, is putting her hand on the throat of the speaker. So imagine you have Helen Keller here, age 8, who has her hand wrapped around Mrs. Sullivan's throat.
Feeling the vibrations of what Mrs. Sullivan is saying, and she's talking the vibrations, and then she's pouring cold water on her, and then is writing in her hand W A T
E and then
E
R
R.
and it's like all of this incredibly like sensual activity. And then by the end of the book, she's kind of be like, and so like me and Mrs. Sullivan at our college, or no, at our cottage, like in Massachusetts, and I'm kind of like, so are you just a thing now? Are you a couple?
No, so
it sounds
Miss Sullivan,
like they're just a couple by the end.
Well, no, because Mrs. Sullivan gets married and they live all three together. But then Helen Keller, which she doesn't write about this book, did like elope with a man named Peter, and everyone was like, I think, very much protective of her and was like, you're not allowed
when they were
to
like,
get
Peter,
married.
Or saying like Peter is a groomer because like she can't consent.
Right.
She's disabled.
Fully. Yeah. So she does like have an engagement, but I think it's then broken off. But she doesn't mention in the book. It's really
so you're
like
saying you don't think she's a lesbian?
I mean, I think she's bi.
Right. I mean, because so much of this book, it's like the whole New England thing and like, you know, Boston. And then also, like, I mean, let's talk about it. The lesbian community and the deaf community have such a massive overlap.
I mean, what is the statistic your nanny gave you, who's an ASL interpreter? And this is a statistic from 1998 from Stephen's former nanny.
And I'm sure that statistic has only gone up since then. But she's an interpreter, and she was like 80% of interpreters are lesbians. And like 80% of the deaf community like is also gay. And it's just like, there's just so much overlap in there.
I mean, my first lesbian friend ever, friend of the pod, Lauren.
ASL
interpreter.
Yeah.
So there you go. So also her, and you know, because she's writing about her and Mrs. Sullivan, you're kind of like, what age are you? Because it's like all of this reflection, and you can't tell. But then when they do live together, I do feel like maybe, you know, yes, she was engaged to this guy and they ran off, but that was also her trying to get this independence, you know, from the Mrs. Sullivan relationship. And sure, Mrs. Sullivan got married, but was her true love?
No, I mean, it's 100% one of those classic, like, Regency era stories where it's like Mrs. Sullivan gets married and she's so, like, jealous of the marriage that she goes off and gets married.
How gay is this line? So she's talking about one of her favorite walks. I built dams of pebbles, made islands and lakes, and dug riverbeds, all for fun, and never dreamed that I was learning a lesson.
Just being a tomboy. Like,
yeah. Just digging, you know.
How Dom is this? She's talking about literally, okay, the very beginning, she's talking about her friend. She has like her black friend, and she's
Mrs. Martha Washington.
Martha Washington. Also, she's literally from like
Alabama.
She's from Alabama, and she's like obsessed with her family tree in this way, like everyone in the 1900s. And she'd be like, my grandmother's cousin was Robert E. Lee. And it's so just like, canceled. Excuse me.
No. This is what is so bisexual, white, privileged, disability activist of her, because people are calling her for this, is she lists, she's always like listing, being like, and my father was actually from the North, but chose to fight for the Confederate side. and then I feel like she's moving to Boston being so like, oh no, what? But then like her whole family is so Confederate.
She's so the girl from The Bachelor and like does need to renounce her like antebellum cotillion that she went to.
And we're like, Helen Keller, are you talking to your family at Thanksgiving?
Are you signing to your family at Thanksgiving? Okay, this is about Martha Washington. In those days, the little colored girl, Martha Washington, the child of our cook and Belle. So it's already like, okay, so it's your cook's good.
Yeah.
And Belle, an old an old setter and a great hunter in her day were my constant companions, Belle being a dog. Martha Washington understood my signs, and I seldom had any difficulty in making her do just as I wished. It pleased me to domineer over her, and she generally submitted to my tyranny rather than risk a hand-to-hand encounter. It's like, so you're just being like, I have a dom-sub relationship at 7?
At 7 with your cook's
daughter. But I also feel like, don't you think it's her being a little bit like, I was the first person in my family to not be racist because I'm blind.
Yeah, she's like, can I get a racism pass because I'm blind and deaf?
She's like, I'm literally blind, so I can't be racist, and that's why I'm friends with the black girl.
I literally don't see color.
I literally don't see color, and unlike Robert E. Lee, who is my grandmother's cousin, but then she's also just being so, like, listing every possible relationship that someone had. My father, Arthur H. Keller, was captain in the Confederate Army. My mother, Kate Adams, was second wife and many years younger. Her grandfather, Benjamin Adams, married Susanna Goodhue and lived in Newbury. Their son, Charles Adams, was born in Newburyport and moved to Helena, Arkansas. He married Lucy Ellen Everett, who belonged to the same family as Everett's as Edward Everett and Dr. Everett Hale. My grandmother was the daughter of Lafayette's aides, Alexander Moore, and granddaughter of Alexander Spotswood, an early colonial governor. But
I think that's how people wrote memoirs back in the day, because it's like, that's what Ulysses S. Grant's like. You do the family tree. You're like, and his cousin like came, and I remember Ulysses was like ashamed that he actually didn't know more of your genealogy.
Right, he was like dragging his aunt for like not even like knowing the family tree and knowing that like her cousin was from the Arkansas Spotswoods.
Right, and like,
not to be confused
the
with
Spotswoods clan did move to Great Newbury.
Celebrity Book Club.
So let's get into this for a second. CSW really claims like Helen Keller is one of their famous alum.
This is my question. So when you were there every day, was it just full Helen Keller propaganda?
It really wasn't. It was more like mentioned twice. People were like, oh, Helen Keller went here for like a year.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't like, let's do a class on her and posters of her. Not really. Honestly, she got as much...
They weren't so like desperately proud of her in that way that just you go to Illinois and they're just like Lincoln.
Like, I think they were not, which I was shocked by. You think there'd be like more posters and stuff.
Yeah, because it's like she's such a like, I feel like she's such an advocate of like education, you know what I mean?
She loves education and like interesting education. So it makes so much so it used to be called Cambridge School for Girls, and really it was a preparatory school for Radcliffe.
Yes.
So she went there when it was actually still in Cambridge.
Wow.
Because, of course, now it's in Weston.
Yes.
It makes sense because it's like she's alt and Cambridge School, you know, they've kept on their alternative education stylings for blind folk. She leaves the school, basically kind of gets kicked out and kind of leaves, which I will say is very CSW. Like, no one like was ever expelled. I feel like people were like asked to leave for just like being like too addicted to weed and missing so many classes. So basically, like, she doesn't get her homework in time or like wants more time for a test. It's very like extended time vibes for SATs. And the teacher says no. So then her mom is like, okay, well, fuck you. Like, we're going to leave.
Yeah, and it's very like teachers and administrators and parents did like reach a mutual agreement that like maybe this isn't the right fit for Helen.
Right fit for you, and we'll find you like a special tutor.
And ultimately, like, it's good that she didn't go to CSW.
And didn't graduate. No, because... And then also she got into Radcliffe.
Still got into Radcliffe.
I'm still so shocked how she, like, straight up learned geometry and algebra via Braille.
Yeah. And I love how this whole book, she's just being like, and again, everything was going fine except for math, which was so boring and stupid. And I was just, like, getting so frustrated and, like, annoyed at calculus and algebra and just being like... Well, why? And then to be like, I know like the American system and not like the British like writing system, whatever. And then it like gets transferred when it's in Braille and it's weird. And it's just like, who cares anyway? Why am I doing geometry? But then she just like randomly does master it.
Literally does master it for her like preparatory tests in Radcliffe. And has this crazy, I was about to say crazy laptop, but she has this like typewriter.
Oh, yeah. She's like, I love like the Wormwood typewriter. I highly recommend it.
She's like, you have to get it. And you can type in Greek, in algebra, in, you know, and it's like being so 3x, like typing Greek. She also mentions, which I love because Boston loves its white ethnicities, where she was like, oh, I loved like all the Grecian stories because like all the Greeks I met in Boston like would always like tell me about their Greek tales. And I feel like it was so just like 1905 and some guy being like, Opa, like you gotta hear the freaking story of Zeus. Let me read this passage about CSW, which is also famous for having a bisexual, making people bisexual. At the Cambridge School, for the first time in my life, I enjoyed the companionship of seeing and hearing girls of my own age. I lived with several others in one of the pleasant houses connected with the school, the house where Mr. Howells used to live, and we all had the advantage of home life. I joined them in many of their games, even Blind Man's Bluff and frolics in the snow. I took long walks with them. We discussed our studies and read aloud the things that interested us. Some of the girls learned to speak to me so that Miss Sullivan did not have to repeat their conversation. So also like in high school, like people were always like walking to the woods to like smoke. And I feel like this is very like early generation that she's like, we're doing snow frolics.
Well, she's also being like, girl who's like one of the teachers is taking a shine to. And is like having like this kind of cool walking relationship with.
Right. And also, but finally she can, I'm a little confused, though I have to say, by the sight, because when she says sometimes she's like, oh, and I could like hang and see with the girls, or she'd be like, she was blonde.
I think she uses the word see more broadly to mean perception. And like, because she's talking about like the doll, and she was just like, and when the next time I saw her, you know what I mean? And like
right.
Anthropomorphizing this like fucked up doll that her arm made out of towels. Like she's like she's
doll sounds so freaky.
And then she like rips a bead off her aunt's dress and is like, make this an eye. Like this doll has no eyes. Please give it an eye. It's like, yeah, I think she just means see in that way, that just like she perceived them at a later point. She definitely always talks about the sun, and she's like, it seemed to me there could be nothing more beautiful than the sun, whose warmth makes all things grow. Because she asks Miss Sullivan, is the sun not love? And she like loves going out into the sun and like bathing in his warmth. It's like, I do wonder if there's a little bit of a perception on the eyelids of like it getting lighter. But there's obviously many levels of blindness and...
Right, and I think we're taught like if you're blind, everything is just black.
Yeah.
Which I don't, as someone who is very visually impaired, like it's, you know... It's just a blur.
Yeah. Like when you're driving, it's basically just a blur. It's what you see in front of you.
Figures that are blurry. I mean, I can see things, but they're extremely blurry.
Which is why it gives me so much confidence to know that you're behind the wheel of a Honda Fit.
Yeah, with prescription sunglasses. So there you go, which have changed my life.
Okay, wait. Can I read this one part about Radcliffe where she kind of like is dragging like some of these bitches? Which I really appreciate. She goes, but college is not the universal Athens I thought it was. There one does not meet the great and the wise face to face. One does not even feel their living touch. They are there, it is true, but they seem mummified. We must extract them from the crowding wall of learning and dissect and analyze them before we can be sure that we have a Milton or an Isaiah, and not merely a clever imitator. Many scholars forget... It seems to me that our enjoyment of the great works of literature depends more upon the depth of our sympathy than upon our understanding. The trouble is that very few of their laborious explanations stick in the memory. The mind drops them as a branch drops its overripe fruit. I'm becoming Irish. It is possible... Okay, here's the part I love. It is possible to know a flower, root and stem and all the processes of growth, and yet to have no appreciation of the flower, fresh, bathed in heaven's dew. She's like, some of you bitches are out here memorizing your names and dates, but y'all don't appreciate the culture.
Well, she says this. I was actually shocked. I took a deep, sensual breath, which I felt sometimes about school, where she said, sometimes school is so much a learning that you don't have time to think.
Yes. Oh my God. The scene where she learns the word for think, that actually like did kind of take my breath away a little bit. Like when Miss Sullivan, like she's trying to figure something out, and
Miss Sullivan's fingering the word think.
She's having trouble like figuring out something with like beads. She's like counting on an abacus or something, and she was like trying to do this like sequence of beads. Finally, I noticed a very obvious error in the sequence, and for an instant, I concentrated my attention on the lesson and tried to think how I should have arranged the beads. Miss Sullivan touched my forehead and spelled with decided emphasis, think. In a flash, I knew that the word was the name of the process that was going on in my head. This was the first conscious perception of an abstract idea. For a long time, I was still. I was not thinking of the beads in my lap, but trying to find a meaning for love in the light of this new idea. The sun had been under a cloud all day, and there had been brief showers, but suddenly the sun broke forth in all its southern splendor. Again, I asked my teacher, is this not love? It's like the idea of her, like, knowing figuring out what an idea is. It's like she's having this, like, much more, like, intellectualized, broken down, concept of, like, how we even form thoughts. Because I think, like, we all take language for granted, and we forget that we are imprisoned by language. We can only think in thoughts.
Right. It's like she already knew what love was, but was like having to categorize it in our, like, classic speaking and seeing.
Yes. And like
ways.
And hadn't gotten to speech before she already had the ideas and the feelings and, like, that sensation of going out into the sun. And there's something so thrilling and exciting about that, and pure. And then also, and it makes you realize, like, language, as much as it frees us, also is trapping us all the time.
Prisoners. Well, I feel like such a classic, like, slumber party, G-rated slumber party question. People are like, would you, like, rather be blind or deaf?
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like no one ever says, would you rather be couldn't touch, numb?
Yeah.
So I ask you, because then it's like, which would you, then it's like, that's actually totally different.
Right. Well, these days we're all really fucking numb because we're on our phones.
But it's like when she talks about, like, swimming, her first time swimming. And my other connection, when she goes to Brewster, Cape Cod, which is where I went to Girl Scout camp in Brewster.
Oh my God.
We're literally the same
You're really the same person. Blind.
Blind.
Cambridge School of Weston Alternative Learners. Cape Cod girls.
Cape Cod girls. Just go to the beach. Like,
and you also love the sun.
and I love the sun, and I love water. And so the camp I went to, it was called Camp Favorite. And you could choose sailing or biking, and the way she also just describes biking, just the feeling of the air, the breeze rushing towards you as you pedal along. Beautiful. And then in the ocean, it actually sounds kind of terrifying because she's, like, in there, and then of course the water goes over her head and she tries to, like, hold on.
Yeah. Things I would not do if I was blind would be, like, be in the ocean. I barely want to get in as a sighted folk.
Or I was like, also, if I was Mrs. Sullivan, I don't know. I'm sure Mrs. Sullivan was right by there.
And she had her on a leash.
Throwing Helen Keller into the ocean and the Cape. It's a little
groomer.
It's like, was she trying to get rid of her? She was like,
it is Seen So Stranger by the Lake, and it's this lesbian murder.
It's a little bit like, oops, I don't know. We were swimming, and then I didn't see her.
Miss Sullivan, more like Eileen Wuornos. Okay, but like, out of the five senses, like,
out of the
which
five
are
senses,
you dropping?
Now I'm like, it's, now that
you can't do taste or smell, though. Out of sight, hearing, touch.
Now I'm like, maybe I would honestly be blind.
Wow. Because you would rather do hearing. I mean, we do work in audio. We are podcasters.
We are podcasters. And music.
Yeah, music. Because my first reaction would say I would ditch hearing because I do love touch so much. I'm so erotic, and sight is huge for me. I'm so superficial. I love fashion, right?
Right. And I was like, wait, I can never, like, see the outfits, but if you think about when she, touching fabrics, and it almost may make your style better. And also this hunger, like, it's never enough. I came home with another T-shirt, and I'm told, when will it ever be enough?
Yeah.
And that's my eyes.
No, that's the tyranny of your eyes. They're so gluttonous. They just want more and more stimulation all the time. They're not happy with 18 black t-shirts. They need 22 black t-shirts.
And then it's 44, okay? But if I was just touching luxurious fabrics, then making love and hearing music and tasting grapes.
God, sounds like heaven.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
When she, like, the end of the book is also, like, her just, like, listing other friends that she made. So she was really close with Mr. Bell.
Yeah, Alexander Graham. Like,
yeah, and I was like, okay.
And I feel like were they just being so like we're fellow like 19th century like celebrities, just being like, I love Alexander. It's so like Christine Quinn just being like, I love Simone Biles. Like we love to connect.
No, I was like, but yeah, you're like, how much were you and Mr. Bell hanging? But maybe I feel like he was probably so intrigued by her since he invented the phone.
No, for sure. If I invented the phone, I would another kind of like, you know, like paragon of communication, right? I mean, would be really interesting to me. They were both great communicators. What I did think was weird by the end of the book, I feel like she doesn't really talk about her like rise to fame, which is kind of the whole point of every celebrity memoir. And I'm kind of like, where's the rise to fame?
And I don't know if the rise to fame was basically mentioned in this like friendship diary where she's like, you actually have to hear Mark Twain's stories. Like he is like no other, seriously. Like he says the craziest shit is basically what she says. And then she's like, and Dr. Bell was amazing. And you're kind of like, so when after Radcliffe, like you don't really tell us kind of when you really, you know, shut off.
My version has the letters in the back. Do you have this?
Same, yeah. I have the letters and
the afterword from Marlee Matlin. Also,
I actually didn't.
Our
read
favorite
that.
deaf actress, Marlee Matlin. She talks about how like Henry Winkler came up to her once, like when she was like a teen, at some like event. Her parents told Henry Winkler to like not be too encouraging, so they not get her hopes up about like becoming an actress.
Oh.
But Henry Winkler was like so supportive of people pursuing their dreams, and he gave her this just like incredibly generic advice and was like, Marlee Matlin, pursue your dreams. And then she was like, and then 8 years later, I did win an Oscar.
Okay, obsessed. And like the Fonz was so just like...
Yeah, so the moral of the story is like, hey, listen to the Fonz and not your parents.
Hell yes. I mean... Yeah, her parents, she is like, I love them, but at the same time, I feel like this book is really about Mrs. Sullivan. A point here, which, back to touch for a second. Here's a quote. The hands of those I meet are dumbly eloquent to me. The touch of some hands is an impertinence. I've met people so empty of joy that when I clasped their frosty fingertips, it seemed as if I were shaking hands with a northeast storm. There are those whose hands have sunbeams in them, so that their grasp warms my heart. So she's saying you can tell you know, this is also getting very like classic business book. Like you can tell a person by their handshake.
By their handshake. Helen Keller is like eight tips for being successful as an entrepreneur. Right. Yeah, I do love that, you know, that intimation there. I mean, I do feel it's like, maybe it's a little bit like she is projecting a little bit, like maybe someone was cold when they came in.
That's the thing. It's like you're living in Boston, like it's gonna be cold.
People are gonna be cold.
And gloves back then, I mean, I don't know. I guess they were like, you know, you could have amazing leather gloves, but
it, you know, at the same time though, it's sort of a challenge to like, you know, I hate the word intuition because I feel like it's so kind of dismissed and it's like female coded in this way that's actually super problematic. But obviously, like, you know, perception is the grand sum of so many other things and not just, you know, rote facts or vision or whatever. It's like, you know, we don't even know how the fucking human mind works, my dude. And it's like, it's like, she's basically saying like vibes are vibes.
Yeah, sorry, literally vibes are vibes. Okay.
Oh my God. Okay. Keller Jenks. But like, she's literally just, it's like, there's pheromones, like there's energy, like there is like, you can sense people's emotions and their like either their reticence or their warmth to interact with you. And like, That's all accurate. And it's probably that much more heightened because she's...
Right, and maybe someone's like afraid, to shake Helen Keller's hand.
Right. She's touching your like, wool blazer that you got at the thrift store. And she's she's feeling the dried ketchup on it. And she's like, you're fun.
You're tons of fun. You have to come over to me and Miss Sullivan's house in Forest Hill, Queens.
Okay, wait. The whole plagiarism scandal part?
Oh, wait. We need to get into this. This is insane. And honestly, like, the fact that she even gets blamed for it is, like, crazy. And, like, that Miss Sullivan really gets... Okay, so she's in school. This is pre-CSW.
She's at Perkins.
Yeah, she's at Perkins, the famous school for, the blind. They have to write a story. She writes a story called Frosty Frolic, I believe, or Frosty Feathers.
Yeah, something about winter. Yeah.
King of the Frost. She turns it in. Everyone's so impressed. And she literally she learned how to write, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, Helen, this is the same story as Jack Frost.
What? It's not. Is it Jack Frost? I feel like it's a slightly different. It's some other like thing about called Frost. There's like a bunch of Frost because she says she's like maybe it was because I'd heard Jack Frost, but not like the Frost Princess and not like Elsa. And it sounds like everyone's just rewriting Frozen or whatever.
The Frost King incident. Okay, she was 11. Okay, so Helen Keller wrote a short story called The Frost King as a birthday present. There was another story called King Frost Again. Basically, they were like, you plagiarized this story, and a teacher at Perkins had like read her the story on the Cape. Mrs. Sullivan had read her the story on the Cape. And like she goes to the thing, she's like, well, I don't even think I read that. And then someone else is like, well, actually, when you were at that Cape House that summer, like you were like that book was on the shelf. And like everyone was being such a Redditor and like trying to like figure out the actual truth mystery of the Frost.
The mystery of the Frost. And then she was like, okay, but if they did, like I didn't read that story, I don't remember it. And then she was like, okay, but then low key I was reading some of my other letters and it was being so that woman's story. And I literally was like randomly like paraphrasing her.
So also kind of badass. She's like getting kicked out of CSW and Perkins School of the Blind.
Like for plagiarism.
Again, chaotic bisexual energy.
But
they asked that she does get kicked out of Perkins. I think just Miss Sullivan gets like asked to leave because Miss Sullivan would just always be there.
Well, and they had a full like disciplinary committee hearing, which is so private school to have a mock trial for fucking like 12-year-olds like. And it was like so me when I also got like suspended for like my infamous prank call, and there was like a full disciplinary trial, and it's just like, can you guys not with the just full like, no, this is a Greco-Roman court of law. It's like,
yeah, that's being so Iliad and just like, and they're like, it's like, okay, she's again. I mean, I think they're being like, we need to be treated everyone equally, but it's like. Okay, so Miss Sullivan last summer wrote out an entire story about like someone named Mr. Frost on her hand. And then a year later, she wrote a story about winter. It's a little bit like,
yeah,
who cares?
Simmer all the way down. But these writer types, I mean, it's just like so like insular like writers workshop for there to be such a like controversy, and it's so the kidney girl, and it's so like the new controversy this week, and it's so just like
cat story or whatever.
It's just like.
Also, I think in school I remember it's like the word plagiarism, like there really is nothing worse. Like
no,
I feel like it's better for you to like cheat on a math test than like
it's the
plagiarize.
It is the most scarlet of all letters. Oh wait, also quickly I just want to say I like that she's like a ruralist. She's very kind of anti-city because cities are like so loud and obnoxious, and
she's obsessed with Wrentham. Can we talk about that? She's like, the finest town in the entire country is Wrentham, Massachusetts.
Is she wrong? People who think all sensations reach us through the eye and the ear have expressed surprise that I should notice any difference, except possibly the absence of pavements between walking in city streets and in country roads. They forget that my whole body is alive to the conditions. The rumble and roar of the city smite the nerves of my face, and I feel the ceaseless tramp of an unseen multitude, and the dissonant tumult frets my spirit.
It borders Foxborough.
Well, next time we're at a Pats game, we should stop by.
Yeah, we'll stop by Rentham and
Maybe Helen Keller's cottage is still there.
Yeah, sense some things that she did.
I feel like they're very like, because of COVID, like the Helen Keller house is not open.
Is now closed, but you can take photos outside of it.
Do inquire for private tours in 2023.
We're emailing like the most Massachusetts like fleece wearing just like historical woman, and she's like, so this was Helen Keller's desk, and we're like, wow.
This was it.
Celebrity Book Club.
Segment School for the Blind. How does she live?
What does she wear? What does she eat?
What does she eat?
Okay, let's start with eating.
Yeah, let's start with eating. I'm like, girl, what are you eating?
She at the beginning, she's really into like bread. She talks about,
it's very like my cook is making bread.
And I like the part where she's like talking about how she learns how to tell her mom she wants ice cream for dinner by being like, brr, it's cold. I want ice cream.
Burr, ice cream cone. I think it was very food of the day. I mean, she was in the South. I feel like it was like biscuits and, you know, a
food
chicken.
Of the day. She was giving chicken and biscuits. She's giving KFC in her childhood years. And then she moves to Massachusetts and she's so lobster roll.
I'm just saying that it's maybe a little more like pot roast.
Yeah, I think it's a pot roast. And because you're like cooking is heating, in that day. So you always got to have something on the fire. Keep the house warm.
I feel like she was so like walking along a path and like pulling one little raspberry.
Yeah. No, because it's like she's not into the tumult of the masses in the city. She wants to be in like a beautiful path. And because how she grew up in is so like orchards and peaches in the South, and she was like so into the honeysuckle and like all the smells and tastes.
Oh, right. She loves suckle.
Yeah. So I think she has a bit of a sweet tooth.
She loves ice cream and peaches. And I feel like she's sticking her tongue out on that first frost, if you will.
Oh, yeah. On Miss Sullivan's frosty peach. All right, what does she wear?
Does she wear, again, these kind of like gauzy gowns, but, long
she's
sleeve.
Femme. Like, she is femme.
She is like a little cottage core.
Yeah.
It's high femme. It's almost, but it's still, she's showing, it's not like she's covering herself. There's some parts are a little bit see-through, always a long sleeve though, I think. And maybe that again was of the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, she's not talking about fabric so much. I think that like, she probably is into comfortable stuff, but I don't think that, because that, as you were saying, the whole blind thing, she's not being like, so judging people on their looks and thinking she needs to present herself a certain way. Although she is very self-conscious in this other way, but then because the plagiarism scandal is so painful to her, and she goes on about it for pages and pages, and she's like, this is the worst thing that ever happened to me. Because it's like, I do feel like she wants to come off as professional, my favorite word. Like,
yes,
she's
wearing like professional dress.
So maybe she is wearing like such a 3-piece like vest, blazer,
right?
dress.
Like later on, well, when she was part of the early ACLU, I feel like, but it was still like modest.
Yeah, and she's still just like founding so many organizations and talking and being an activist and a speaker and like doing her TED Talks like in Philadelphia.
Activist clothing. I'm seeing a lot of like browns, olive greens.
Yeah.
Not like no bright reds.
No bright reds. I don't know.
Well,
I think she probably is wearing bright reds because she's just like, I know that like people will like be drawn to me because I feel like she has this sense of like other people's vision in a weird way. Maybe not.
Interesting. Okay. I'm voting olives. You're voting bright reds because I think of in Guys and Dolls, the woman who's like the suffragette. That's Guy Masterson courts, and she's in this like all red outfit. So that's kind of my touchstone for. I was like, is she being an all-red suffragette?
Here's the problem. Every photo of her is in black and white, so we'll never know. Okay. How does she live? I feel like there's kind of like, it is a little bit like there's a bunch of shit in her house. Like I feel like feel like she's got like a lot of
I think it's teacups
and mementos and like piles of books, and like she's like, oh, I have this really cool like old coin like on the wall and like more frame shit, quilts, like it's like a full antique store in there.
Influencer way, I feel like in blind technology, like people are sending her new shit. You know what I mean? Like she's getting new like braille magnifiers and different embossed like typewriters.
She has like all the latest braille tech is just like in her like side cottage, and she's going through. She's like, oh, I need to send a thank you letter to
her
Mrs.
PR.
Denby for that.
She's like, oh god, okay, this is like my closet of like all stuff that's sent to me. Miss Sullivan is like, we have to write letters to like thank the like new braille people. This is a new like mug that has braille on it.
Just like a built-in magnifying glass, like tea steeper.
That whole story where she has like a bird and then the cat eats the bird.
Oh, and she knows. She's so birdcage.
Yeah, she's being birdcage again.
She's like
antique
full
store.
anthropology.
Yes. Olives, that's from linens, big buttons.
Okay, you're right. I take away the very red. She's so like blush colored shit. All right. Who are you in the book?
Are you Mrs. Sullivan?
Miss Sullivan has an extraordinary amount of patience that I'm not sure if I possess. No. Although sometimes I can be a good teacher with kids, but I feel like I'm a good teacher for like 20 minutes, not for like 17 years.
Right. I guess I was kind of thinking because sometimes you have a younger lover.
Oh, was that your justification?
But no, I don't think you have the 20-year patience. I feel like you would be like, oh no, like this changed my life. I'm teaching this blind girl. And that would be like, oh, like, no, I actually like have to write an article. Like I can't keep on.
I kind of think I misses like the woman she plagiarizes a little bit. I'm just being like, who is this random girl who's like trying to be such a disabled activist who's plagiarizing me, and now she's writing me so many apology letters, and I'm just like, she actually needs to like step off. She's like obsessed with me, and it's weird. That
is you, and you're like posting in the Boston Herald, just being like, oh wait, sidebar, her fiance was a writer for the Herald, by the way.
Oh my god, yeah, icon.
Actual icon. I mean, obviously, I'm Helen, CSW, blind, cape. I'm like feeling the ocean, being like, this feels so good. But I'm blind.
You're both like... water bugs.
On our bike path, being like, I can't see the figures in front of me, but this breeze feels damn good. And I hate math, so
oh my god, never.
It actually never ends. It's scary at this point.
Actually spooky. You are her like reincarnated. Helen, are you in there?
Helen.
Okay, you know what? I give this book 3.5 honeysuckle plants out of 5. I wanted more about her rise to fame. The writing is beautiful. She's a really beautiful writer. And it moves right along at a great clip. There's some really stunning passages in here. I would have liked just even more like of her. I think her philosophy on life. Like there's some passages where you really get this like perspective.
Yes.
I would like
and the
even
end, it goes into this a little bit like let me list my famous friends thing, which is a little weird. Yeah. And I do wonder because she does have other books if that gets into more of her views and stuff. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm a little. I mean, I gotta admit it. And maybe just coming off Kelly Ripa, which was so of this time, and Zaza Zoo. I was a little bit bored at first. I will admit that. So I'm going with 3.2 empty bird cages out of 5. But then some stuff I was so struck by, and really just impressed by her learning.
And I think ultimately I was inspired, and I came away with a renewed interest in my own senses. And
same, and touch. I was like, walking outside, I was like, let me feel the sun on me. And just to like,
take a minute and appreciate the marvel of the way that our brains work and everything we take for granted, and what a gift it is to be able to string words together and understand what each other are saying and be able to express yourself, and what an innate human desire it is to be able to express yourself.
We take so much for granted.
Yeah.
And I mean, back to the vision thing, I always feel that, you know, when my glasses come to a point where either they've broken or get scratched and it's time for a new pair, but the new pair hasn't come yet. And there's this week in between of not seeing that well.
Right.
And doing my superpower.
Right.
Okay. And I get the glasses and I say, I mean, the modern technology. I'm like, I mean, imagine if I was in medieval times.
Yeah. They would have been just like, you know what?
You're done.
You're done.
Yeah.
No, they would. They would put you in the field, I think.
Yeah, I would have been in the fields. But anyway, seeing is cool, and shout out to Lens Crafters and the whole team there. All right, well, another rip-roaring, rollicking episode. Helen, I'm curious, honestly, to read more of her writing, even though I was a little bit bored.
She piqued your interest.
It did. Kind of more of the, you know, I want to know more of the goss, you know, about her and this Herald writer. Well.
Good job, Helen.
Good job, Helen. Wicked good job. Or as we say in Massachusetts, do your job.
Do your job.
Do your job.
Do your job, Helen. All right.
Well, best. Celebrity Book Club is presented by Prologue Projects. The show is produced by Benjamin Frisch, with editorial support from Leon Nafok, Andrew Parsons, Arlena Revelo, and Madeline Kaplan. Our production manager is Percia Verlin. Original theme song by Stephen Phillips Horst. Artwork by Teddy Blanks at Chips NY. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CBC The Pod. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review, and don't forget to tell your friends, well, about us. And don't forget to go to patreon.com for access to the VIP Lounge, our exclusive bonus podcast.